Welcome to The Explainer. Listen, if you're watching this on a rig you bought, say, more than 12 months ago, I hate to break it to you, but you are officially bringing a knife to a laser fight. The hardware landscape hasn't just shifted a little bit, it has literally shattered every traditional boundary of what we even consider a computer. We are looking at a massive structural paradigm shift right now. The old rules of tech, yeah, they simply don't apply anymore. So grab your anti-static wristbands, folks, because we are diving right into the 2026 Computing Survival Guide. Think about this. 5 years ago, if I asked you if a 600-gram handheld could actually go toe-to-toe with a 15-kilogram behemoth of a desktop tower, you probably would have laughed me right out of the server room. I mean, it sounds physically impossible, right? How on earth does a device that literally fits in your jacket pocket trade blows with a massive rig that basically doubles as a space heater during the winter? Well, the answer lies in a total rewriting of performance per watt metrics. And here it is, the absolute secret weapon making this heresy possible, 128 gigabits per second. That is the staggering transfer speed of the OCuLink 2.0 interconnect. You see, bandwidth has become the great equalizer here. When your tiny handheld can dock and instantaneously pipe data to external graphics and storage at 128 gigabits, guys, that is like swapping a garden hose for a city water main. Suddenly, the physical boundaries of the chassis just completely disappear. It doesn't matter that the handheld is tiny anymore, because it can instantly tap right into massive desktop-grade peripherals without even a single drop of latency. Now, I know what you're thinking. What about the heat, right? You can't cheat physics. Well, maybe you can't cheat it, but you can definitely outsmart it. Computing in 2026 isn't a game of physical size anymore. It's a brutal, all-out battle of thermodynamics. Enter thermal modularity. We are way past slapping loud plastic fans on copper pipes. We are talking about solid-state active cooling. Things like piezoelectric microbellows and liquid metal composites. Those are just standard now. This is exactly how engineers are extracting heat so incredibly efficiently that a miniaturized chassis can dissipate 65 watts continuously. And the best part? It does it without sounding like a jet engine taking off in your living room. Okay, let's dive into this. We are officially living in the era of heterogeneous computing. Thanks to these wild sub-3 nanometer nodes from TSMC and Intel, and ultra-fast data highways like PCIe 6.0 and Thunderbolt 5, your CPU and GPU, they aren't acting alone anymore. They are flanked by the now utterly indispensable Neural Processing Unit, or NPU. Your system is basically this highly efficient, tightly packed city of silicon. Every single block has a hyper-specific job, and that allows for monumental performance without that traditional, insane power draw we used to see. And because the silicon is just so incredibly good now, the form factor you choose isn't really about absolute power limits anymore, it's about your personal play style. So it's time to choose your hardware fighter. Let's look at the 2026 form factor roster, and honestly, we're going to treat the 4 main computing classes exactly like the wildly different RPG character classes they are. First up in the ring, the heavyweight, desktop towers. Look, these are absolutely no longer general-purpose machines. They are highly specialized computing nodes of pure brute force. We're talking ATX 3.1 and 4.0 power standards, strictly to handle violent 600-watt transient spikes from monsters like the RTX 50 series and RDNA 4 and 5. I'm talking spikes big enough to literally dim your neighbor's lights. And the memory? DDR6 natively pushing 12,800 megatransfers per second. That enables zero-latency direct storage, so your AAA games and VFX assets load instantly. Plus, my personal favorite feature, back-connect motherboards. 0 visible cables. Nothing. It is an absolute airflow dream. Next up on the roster, we have the Assassin Mini PCs. These things range from just 1 to 3 liters in volume, and man, these silent killers are actively cannibalizing the entry-level and mid-range desktop market. They're powered by insanely dense APUs like Intel's Panther Lake and AMD's Strix Halo, boasting massive 256-bit memory buses. That is memory bandwidth we previously reserved strictly for discrete graphics cards. All of it kept icy cool with advanced vapor chamber optimization and liquid metal. You slap an OCuLink cable on one of these tiny bricks, and boom, it instantly transforms into a high-end Edge AI server or a flagship gaming rig. It's wild. Then, we've got the Ranger, handheld PCs. This is where density engineering basically goes absolutely feral. We're looking at custom AMD Zen 5C and 6C chips paired with RDNA 4, and they dynamically scale from a mere 5 watts all the way up to 35 watts. They are rocking these gorgeous tandem OLED displays, hitting 1,000 nits of full-screen brightness, all while barely sipping power. But the real black magic here? The battery. Thanks to silicon anode technology, engineers have somehow crammed an 80 watt-hour battery into the exact same physical dimensions that used to only hold 40 watt-hours. Let that sink in. A 600-gram device with all-day power, it is frankly absurd. And finally, the absolute battlefield that is laptops. Here, we aren't just comparing brands anymore. We are witnessing the great architecture wars between x86-64 and ARM-64. You've got Intel Core Ultra Gen 3 and AMD Ryzen AI 400 fighting desperately against Qualcomm's Snapdragon X Gen 3 and Apple's M4 and M5 silicon. And guess what? ARM is winning major ground, seizing over 40% of the ultra-portable market. Why? Sustained performance per watt and literally multi-day standby times. You combine that with universal solid-state haptic trackpads and Wi-Fi 8 delivering sub-millisecond latencies, well, laptops have never been more lethal. Now, it's not just about the form factors themselves anymore. It's really about where they come from. Let's look at global tech supply factions and how different regions of the world are stubbornly tackling hardware based entirely on their own cultural tech philosophies. Let's start with the Americas, where the philosophy is all about ecosystem and enterprise. Apple, of course, is fiercely maintaining its famous walled garden of silicon, where absolute hardware and software harmony lets macOS juggle insane workloads effortlessly without the developer having to lift a finger. On the flip side, you have Dell, HP, and Microsoft relentlessly pushing the AI PC. Their ultimate goal? Tightly coupling local NPUs with Copilot Plus to run 15 billion parameter small language models completely offline. It's all about ensuring total enterprise data security. Now, fly across the pond, and Europe has a completely different ethos: sustainability and modularity. Driven heavily by carbon neutrality and some pretty strict legislation, the right to repair is absolute king here. Frameworks, expansion card system, and upgradable mainboards have really set the gold standard. In fact, European laws now actually mandate easily replaceable batteries and incredibly clear supply chain carbon tracking. This has birthed this massive market for fanless, silent edge computing. We're seeing massive, completely passive aluminum chassis from brands like Akasa and Cirrus 7. They don't want it fast and loud, they want it sustainable, modular, and dead silent. And then we have Asia. The philosophy here is beautifully simple: maximum specification density. Spearheaded by Taiwanese giants and mainland Chinese firms, this is the absolute bleeding edge. They don't care about a walled garden, they vastly favor open standards. They are rapidly iterating motherboard designs to support the absolute latest OCuLink standards, slapping on massively over-engineered copper cooling arrays, grabbing highly bin processors, and aggressively overclocking them just to squeeze every single drop of performance out of the silicon. It is just glorious, beautiful overkill. So, knowing all this wild regional and architectural stuff, how do you actually survive the current hardware market without wasting your money? Welcome to the boss battle, future-proofing for 2026 and beyond. And this brilliantly illustrates our ultimate survival guide. I highly recommend you actually pause the explainer right now and screenshot this matrix. Seriously, save it. If you need local LLM training or 8K VFX work, look, you still absolutely need that 1200-watt desktop. But if you want edge AI or a living room powerhouse, that 120-watt mini PC with OCuLink is your best bet for sure. Mobile pros, you're living in that 15 to 17-watt laptop space. And gamers are taking the 40-watt handhelds on the go. Basically, this is your ultimate cheat sheet to perfectly match your specific workload thermodynamics to the exact right piece of hardware. But listen, no matter which form factor you ultimately choose, there is a hard floor you absolutely cannot ignore anymore. 50 TOPS. 50 tera operations per second. If the architecture you are looking at buying does not have a dedicated NPU capable of hitting this specific number, honestly, put the credit card down and walk away. I'm serious. Without 50 TOPS, that machine is completely obsolete for modern OS background tasks. It's basically just a very, very expensive typewriter at this point. And here is perhaps the harshest truth of 2026. Upgradability, for the most part, is dead. RIP. Because we desperately need ultra-low latency, LPDDR6 memory is now soldered directly to the board in laptops and handhelds. You cannot pop it open and add a stick of RAM later, like the good old days. Unified memory architectures mean you are actively sharing that pool across the CPU, the GPU, and that all-important NPU. So buying a base capacity of 32 gigabytes of unified RAM, that isn't a luxury anymore. It is a strict, non-negotiable survival requirement. Which brings us to the core thesis of this entire technological revolution. To quote our source material directly, the form factor no longer dictates absolute capability. It merely dictates the thermal envelope and peripheral scalability. Think about that for a second. The physical location of your silicon matters infinitely less than the hyper-fast bandwidth connecting it to you. So I'm going to leave you with this. After looking at 128 gigabit interconnects, 50 TOPS NPUs, tandem OLEDs, and these ridiculous silicon anode batteries crammed into devices the size of a paperback novel, take a really good hard look at your current setup. Is your PC already obsolete? Let that sink in. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive. Stay curious, stay upgraded, and I'll see you in the next explainer.